When 22-year-old Sarah Martinez stepped onto the military base carrying her duffel bag and a heart full of determination, the seasoned soldiers around her exchanged knowing glances. Another recruit who thought she could handle the intensity of military working dog operations. They'd seen dozens like her before, young, eager, and completely unprepared for the brutal reality of training elite canines for combat missions. What they didn't know was that Sarah had been raised on a ranch where she'd trained rescue dogs since she was 8 years old, and she carried a secret that would soon turn their skepticism into stunned respect. Within 6 months, she would accomplish something that no handler in the unit's 15-year history had ever achieved, proving that sometimes the most underestimated person in the room becomes the one everyone remembers forever. Part 1. Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stood outside the chain-link fence surrounding the military working dog compound at Fort Braxton. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the North Carolina base, and she could hear the sharp barks and commands echoing from within the training facility. Her stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she adjusted her newly issued uniform, the fabric still stiff and unfamiliar against her skin. The guard at the entrance barely glanced up from his clipboard. "You the new handler?" he asked, his tone suggesting he'd already made up his mind about her chances of success. "Yes, sir. Sarah Martinez reporting for duty," she replied, trying to project more confidence than she felt. He looked her up and down, taking in her slight frame and youthful appearance. "Good luck, kid. You're going to need it." The gate buzzed open, and Sarah stepped into what would become her new world. The compound was larger than she had imagined. Rows of concrete kennels stretched across the facility, each housing a different breed of working dog. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, Dutch Shepherds, and Labrador Retrievers paced behind the metal gates, their eyes alert and intelligent. The sound was overwhelming, dozens of dogs barking, trainers shouting commands, and the constant buzz of activity that never seemed to cease. "Martinez!" The voice cut through the noise like a knife. Sarah turned to see a tall, broad-shouldered man striding toward her. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and his bearing suggested years of military discipline. "I'm Sergeant First Class Williams, your training supervisor. You're late." Sarah glanced at her watch. She was actually 3 minutes early, but she decided not to argue. "Yes, sir. Won't happen again." Williams studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes taking in every detail. "Let me guess. You had a pet dog growing up, maybe took some obedience classes at the local pet store, and now you think you're ready to train military working dogs?" "No, sir. I grew up on a ranch where we bred and trained search and rescue dogs. I've been working with working breeds since I was 8 years old," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. A few nearby trainers had stopped their work to listen to the exchange. She could see the smirks on their faces, the way they glanced at each other with barely concealed amusement. It was clear that her background didn't impress anyone here. "Search and rescue," Williams repeated slowly. "Well, Martinez, this isn't about finding lost hikers in the mountains. These dogs are trained for combat operations, drug detection, explosives detection, and patrol work. One mistake out there, and people die. You understand that?" "Yes, sir. I understand the gravity of the responsibility." Williams nodded curtly. "We'll see. Thompson." He called out to a stocky man with graying hair who was working with a Belgian Malinois near the agility course. "This is our new handler. Show her the ropes, start her with the basics. Maybe she'll last longer than the last one." Thompson approached with a skeptical expression. "How long did the last one last?" Sarah asked, immediately regretting the question when she saw Williams' expression darken. 3 days, Thompson answered. "Couldn't handle the intensity. These dogs aren't pets, sweetheart. They're weapons with 4 legs and a bite that can crush bone." Sarah felt her jaw tighten at the condescending tone, but she forced herself to remain calm. "I'm ready to learn, sir." The first week was a baptism by fire. Sarah was assigned to work with the most basic tasks, cleaning kennels, preparing food, and observing the experienced handlers work with their dogs. The physical demands were intense, but it wasn't the hard work that challenged her most. It was the constant skepticism and subtle undermining from her fellow trainees and supervisors. During her first training session, she was paired with Rex, a massive German Shepherd with intelligent dark eyes and a reputation for being difficult to handle. The dog had been returned by 2 previous handlers who claimed he was too aggressive and unpredictable for effective training. "Rex here will test you," Thompson explained as they approached the kennel. He's smart, but he's got an attitude. Previous handlers couldn't establish dominance with him. If you can't control your dog, you can't be trusted in the field. Sarah studied Rex through the chain-link gate. The dog sat perfectly still, his ears erect, and his gaze fixed on her. There was something in his eyes that reminded her of Storm, a German shepherd she had worked with on the ranch who had been labeled untrainable by 3 different trainers before her father brought him home. "What's his background?" she asked. "Military breeding program. High drive, high intelligence, but previous handlers said he was too independent. Doesn't follow commands consistently," Thompson replied. "We're probably going to have to retire him from the program if this doesn't work out." Sarah nodded slowly. She had seen dogs like Rex before, intelligent animals who had been misunderstood rather than properly challenged. "Can I work with him alone for a few minutes?" Thompson and Williams exchanged glances. "Sure," Williams said, "but we'll be watching. First sign of trouble, we're stepping in." Sarah entered the kennel slowly, keeping her body language relaxed and non-threatening. Rex remained seated, but his ears tracked her movement. She didn't try to approach him immediately. Instead, she sat down on the ground about 6 feet away and simply observed him. The watching trainers began to murmur among themselves. This wasn't standard protocol. Handlers were supposed to establish immediate dominance, to show the dog who was in charge from the first interaction. Sitting on the ground seemed like a sign of weakness. But Sarah had learned something different during her years on the ranch. Respect wasn't demanded, it was earned. And with intelligent, strong-willed dogs like Rex, earning respect required patience and understanding. After several minutes of silence, Rex's posture began to relax slightly. His ears remained alert, but his tail gave the slightest twitch. Sarah slowly extended her hand, not reaching toward him, but simply making it available if he chose to investigate. Rex studied her for another full minute before slowly rising to his feet. He approached cautiously, his nose working to gather information about this new human. When he was close enough, he sniffed her extended hand, then sat down again, this time only 3 feet away. "Good boy," Sarah said softly. "You're not difficult. You're just selective." She spent the rest of the session simply building trust, occasionally offering quiet praise when Rex chose to move closer or respond to her presence. By the end of the 30-minute session, Rex was sitting beside her, allowing her to run her fingers through his thick coat. When she emerged from the kennel, the gathered trainers were quiet. Thompson looked confused, Williams appeared thoughtful, and several of the other handlers seemed genuinely surprised. "Interesting approach," Williams said finally, "but building friendship isn't the same as establishing control. Can you make him work?" "Give me a week," Sarah replied confidently. That evening, Sarah sat in her small barracks room, writing in the journal she had kept since childhood. She described her first day, her impressions of the facility, and her encounter with Rex. But mostly, she wrote about the challenge that lay ahead. She knew that proving herself here would require more than just demonstrating that she could connect with difficult dogs. She would need to show that her methods could produce results that exceeded the traditional approaches used by the military training program. She would need to prove that sometimes the techniques that seemed soft or unconventional could actually create stronger, more reliable partnerships between handlers and their canine partners. The next morning brought new challenges. During the group training session, Sarah was assigned to work on basic obedience commands with Rex, while the other handlers worked with their dogs on the same exercises. The goal was simple: demonstrate heel, sit, stay, and come command with reliability and precision. Most of the other dogs performed adequately, responding to their handlers' firm commands with military precision. But when Sarah began working with Rex, something different happened. Instead of the sharp, authoritative commands favored by military protocol, she used a calm, clear tone that seemed to capture Rex's attention more effectively than shouting. "Rex, heel," she said clearly, beginning to walk forward. The dog immediately fell in a step beside her, his shoulder aligned with her leg in perfect position. When she stopped, he sat automatically without being commanded. When she called him to come from across the training field, he responded instantly, his focus entirely on her. The other handlers began to notice. Rex's responses were not just obedient. They were eager and precise in a way that suggested genuine engagement rather than mere compliance. "How did you do that?" asked Maria Santos, a fellow trainee who had been struggling with her assigned dog, a stubborn Belgian Malinois named Bruno. Sarah glanced around to make sure the supervising trainers were out of earshot. I think a lot of these dogs are smarter than we give them credit for, she said. They want to work, they want to have a job, but they also want to be treated as partners rather than just tools. When you show them respect and make the training engaging instead of just demanding, they respond differently. Maria looked skeptical, but the instructors say we need to maintain dominance. Show them we're the alpha. If we're too soft, they won't respect us in high-stress situations. I think there's a difference between being weak and being respectful, Sarah replied. You can still maintain leadership while acknowledging that your dog is an intelligent partner. In fact, I think dogs perform better when they understand that their success is valued and appreciated. This conversation marked the beginning of a subtle shift in the dynamics of the training group. While Sarah continued to face skepticism from the instructors and some of the more traditional handlers, she began to gain respect from her fellow trainees who could see the results of her methods. By the end of her first week, Rex had not only mastered all the basic obedience commands, but was performing them with a level of precision and enthusiasm that caught the attention of everyone in the program. During the weekly evaluation session, Sergeant Williams watched carefully as Sarah put Rex through his paces. Impressive progress, he admitted reluctantly. But basic obedience is just the foundation. Next week, we start specialized training, detection work, protection training, and tactical scenarios. That's where we separate the handlers who can actually do the job from those who are just good at playing fetch. Sarah nodded confidently. We're ready for whatever comes next, sir. As she led Rex back to his kennel that evening, she could feel the eyes of the other trainers on her. Some watched with curiosity, others with skepticism, and a few with something that might have been the beginning of respect. But Sarah knew that the real tests were still ahead. The next phase of training would determine not just whether she could succeed in the program, but whether her approach could revolutionize the way military working dogs were trained and deployed. That night, as she sat in her room preparing for the challenges ahead, Sarah felt a quiet confidence building within her. She had always believed that the strongest partnerships were built on mutual respect and trust rather than dominance and fear. Now, she would have the chance to prove that this philosophy could succeed even in the demanding world of military dog training. The second week of training brought Sarah face-to-face with the reality of specialized military working dog operations. The morning began with a briefing in a sterile conference room, where Sergeant Williams outlined the different tracks available to military working dogs and their handlers. Detection work is the backbone of our program, Williams explained, pointing to a chart on the wall. Explosives detection, narcotics detection, and specialized scent work. These dogs save lives every day by finding threats before they can harm our soldiers or civilians. The training is intensive, the standards are unforgiving, and the responsibility is enormous. Sarah sat in the front row, taking careful notes while Rex lay calmly at her feet. Around them, other handlers shifted nervously as Williams continued his presentation. The statistics were sobering. Dogs that failed detection training were often reassigned to less critical roles or, in some cases, retired from service entirely. Martinez, Williams called out suddenly. You and Rex will be starting with explosives detection. We'll see how your unconventional methods work when the stakes are life and death. The explosives detection training facility was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Multiple rooms were set up to simulate different environments: a mock airport terminal, a replica of a vehicle checkpoint, and various outdoor scenarios complete with hidden training devices. The smell of different explosive compounds hung faintly in the air, carefully controlled but unmistakable. Their instructor was Staff Sergeant Jennifer Park, a compact woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She had been working with detection dogs for 8 years and had deployed twice to Afghanistan with her previous partner, a Belgian Malinois named Titan, who had located over 40 improvised explosive devices during their deployment. Detection work is about precision, Park explained to the group of 6 handlers and their dogs. A false positive can shut down an entire operation unnecessarily. A misdetection can cost lives. Your dog needs to be absolutely reliable, completely focused, and totally under your control. She gestured toward a training area set up like a checkpoint. We start with basic scent introduction. Your dog will learn to identify the specific odors of common explosive compounds. Once they can reliably detect and alert on training aids, we progress to more complex scenarios. Sarah watched carefully as Park demonstrated with her current training dog, a young German shepherd named Apollo. The dog worked methodically through the area, his nose tracking carefully along surfaces and into crevices. When he encountered a training aid hidden beneath a chair, he sat immediately and stared at the location, the standard alert behavior that indicated find. Clean, precise, unmistakable, Parks said. That's what we're looking for. Now, let's see what your dogs can do. The first few handlers worked through the basic exercise with mixed results. Some dogs showed immediate interest in the scent, but struggled with consistent alert behavior. Others seemed distracted by the unfamiliar environment. When Sarah's turn came, she could feel the familiar weight of skeptical attention from the watching trainers and handlers. "Rex, ready to work?" she asked quietly, and the dog's ears perked up with obvious enthusiasm. Sarah had spent time the previous evening researching detection training methods, particularly focusing on ways to make the work engaging and rewarding for the dog. She understood that detection work could become monotonous for intelligent dogs if it wasn't presented as an interesting challenge. As they approached the training area, Sarah kept her energy calm, but focused. Rex seemed to pick up on her intensity, his posture becoming more alert without losing the relaxed confidence that had characterized their previous training sessions. "Search," Sarah commanded clearly, and Rex began to work. What happened next surprised everyone watching. Instead of the methodical but somewhat mechanical search pattern they had observed with other dogs, Rex worked with obvious enthusiasm and intelligence. His nose tracked efficiently across surfaces, but his body language suggested that he was genuinely engaged in solving a puzzle rather than simply following commands. When he located the first training aid, his alert was immediate and unmistakable. But instead of the somewhat anxious stare that some dogs exhibited, Rex's alert was calm and confident. He sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the location, his tail giving just the slightest wag that seemed to say, "Found it. What's next? Good boy." Sarah praised enthusiastically, producing a tennis ball that served as Rex's reward. The dog's entire demeanor brightened as they played a brief game of tug-of-war with the ball. Staff Sergeant Park watched this interaction with interest. "You're using play reward instead of food motivation?" Rex seems to be more driven by the opportunity to engage and interact than by treats, Sarah explained. The game becomes part of the reward for successful detection, which makes the whole process more engaging for him. Park nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. Let's see how he handles multiple hides." The next exercise involved a more complex scenario with 3 training aids hidden in different locations throughout the mock checkpoint area. This was where many dogs began to struggle, either missing subsequent hides after finding the first one or becoming overstimulated by multiple scent sources. Rex approached the challenge with the same focused enthusiasm he had shown in the first exercise. He located the first hide quickly and alerted clearly. But instead of losing focus after receiving his reward, he seemed to understand that the game was continuing. He found the second and third hides with increasing confidence, his alert behavior becoming more precise with each success. "Outstanding," Park said when the exercise was complete. "That's some of the cleanest detection work I've seen from a dog in his first week of training." The praise was gratifying, but Sarah could see that some of the other handlers were struggling with their dogs. Maria Santos was having particular difficulty with Bruno, the Belgian Malinois, who seemed more interested in the distractions of the training environment than in the detection work. During the lunch break, Maria approached Sarah with frustration evident in her voice. "I don't understand what I'm doing wrong," she said. "Bruno is smart. He's got a great nose, but he just won't focus on the detection work. He keeps getting distracted by everything else that's going on." Sarah glanced over at Bruno, who was lying in the shade but had his head up, ears tracking every sound and movement in the area. "He looks like he's got a really high drive level. Maybe he needs more structure to help him channel that energy." "What do you mean?" Sarah thought for a moment. "With Rex, I've noticed that he works better when he understands the rules of the game and when the work feels like a partnership rather than just commands. Maybe Bruno needs clearer communication about what you want from him, and maybe he needs the work to be challenging enough to hold his interest." That afternoon, Sarah had the opportunity to observe Maria working with Bruno again. She noticed that Maria's commands were often unclear or contradictory, and that Bruno's high energy level was being treated as a problem to be suppressed rather than as a resource to be directed. During a break in the formal training, Sarah approached Staff Sergeant Park. "Ma'am, would it be possible for me to work with Handler Santos and Bruno for a few minutes? I think I might have some suggestions that could help." Park studied her for a moment. You've been here for exactly 8 days, Martinez. What makes you think you can help solve a problem that experienced trainers have been working on for weeks? Sarah felt her confidence waver for a moment, but then she thought about all the difficult dogs she had worked with on the ranch. Sometimes a fresh perspective can see things differently, ma'am. And I think Bruno might just need a slightly different approach to channel his drive effectively. Park considered this, then nodded. 10 minutes. Show me what you've got. Working with Bruno was different from working with Rex, but the underlying principles were the same. Sarah quickly recognized that the dog's apparent distractibility was actually a sign of his intelligence and high drive level. He wasn't ignoring the detection work because he couldn't do it. He was losing interest because the work wasn't challenging enough to hold his attention. Sarah restructured the exercise to make it more engaging. Instead of simply commanding Bruno to search, she created a scenario that felt more like a game with clear rules and increasing levels of difficulty. She used Maria's energy and enthusiasm as part of the reward system, showing Bruno that successful detection work led to exciting interaction with his handler. Within minutes, Bruno's behavior transformed. His scattered energy focused into purposeful work, and his natural intelligence began to shine through. When he made his first clean detection and alert, his tail wagged with obvious pride and excitement. "How did you do that?" Maria asked in amazement. "You didn't change Bruno," Sarah explained. "You just helped him understand how to use his natural abilities in the way you wanted. He's always been capable of this work. He just needed clearer communication and more engaging challenges." Staff Sergeant Park had been watching the entire interaction. When the exercise was complete, she approached Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "That was impressive problem solving," she said. "You correctly identified that the dog's apparent behavioral issues were actually training and communication problems. That kind of insight usually takes years of experience to develop." Sarah felt a flush of pride, but she tried to remain humble. "I've had good teachers, ma'am, and I think these dogs are teaching me as much as I'm teaching them." Over the following days, word began to spread through the training facility about Sarah's unconventional but effective methods. Handlers began to seek her advice informally, and she found herself serving as an unofficial mentor to some of her fellow trainees. But with increased visibility came increased scrutiny. Sergeant Williams began to watch her training sessions more closely, and Sarah could sense that he was looking for any sign that her methods might not hold up under pressure. The test came during the final exercise of the week. All handlers and their dogs were required to complete a comprehensive detection scenario that simulated a real-world checkpoint operation. The exercise included multiple vehicles, civilian role players, environmental distractions, and time pressure designed to test both the technical skills and the stress tolerance of the dog handler teams. As Sarah and Rex approached the starting line for their turn, she could feel the weight of expectation from everyone watching. This wasn't just about passing the exercise. It was about proving that her approach could deliver results under realistic operational conditions. "Ready?" Williams asked, his tone neutral but his eyes watchful. Sarah took a deep breath and looked down at Rex, who was sitting calmly beside her, his intelligent eyes focused on her face with complete trust and attention. "We're ready, sir." The comprehensive detection exercise was set up to replicate the chaos and pressure of a real military checkpoint. Multiple vehicles sat arranged in a convoy formation. Civilian role players milled around, creating natural distractions, and hidden throughout the scenario were 6 training aids representing different types of explosive devices. The handlers had 25 minutes to complete a thorough search of the entire area, and any missed detection would result in automatic failure. Sarah stood at the edge of the training area, studying the layout while Rex sat calmly beside her. Around them, the other handler dog teams waited their turns, the tension palpable as they watched their fellow trainees attempt the challenging exercise. So far, only 2 of the 6 teams had successfully completed the scenario without missing any devices. "Martinez, you're up," Staff Sergeant Park called out. As Sarah approached the starting position, she was acutely aware of the crowd of observers gathered to watch. Sergeant Williams stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Several instructors from other training programs had arrived to observe the session, drawn by reports of the unusual training methods that were producing exceptional results. Even some of the facility's senior leadership had found reasons to be in the area. "Remember," Park said quietly as Sarah prepared to begin, this isn't just about finding the devices. We're evaluating the reliability of your dog's alerts, your ability to maintain control under pressure, and your efficiency in covering the search area. In a real situation, speed and accuracy can mean the difference between life and death. Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of what she was about to attempt. But as she looked down at Rex, she felt the familiar sense of calm confidence that had characterized all their training sessions. The dog's intelligent eyes met hers, and she could see that he was ready to work. "Rex, ready to work?" she asked, using the phrase that had become their signal for beginning detection exercises. The dog's posture immediately shifted into focused attention, his ears erect, and his body language communicating readiness and enthusiasm. "Search," Sarah commanded clearly, and they began. Rex approached the first vehicle with systematic precision, but Sarah immediately noticed something different about his work pattern. Instead of the mechanical searching she had observed in other dogs, Rex seemed to be thinking about the task, analyzing the environment, and making intelligent decisions about where to focus his attention. As they worked around the first pickup truck, Rex suddenly stopped and looked back at Sarah with an expression that seemed to communicate uncertainty. His body language suggested that he was picking up some kind of scent, but he wasn't exhibiting the clear alert behavior that indicated a definitive find. Other dogs in similar situations have been pushed by their handlers to make a decision, either alert or move on. But Sarah recognized that Rex was trying to communicate something more nuanced. She trusted his intelligence enough to investigate further. "What is it, buddy?" she asked quietly, moving to examine the area where Rex had shown interest. Rex approached a wheel well on the truck and sniffed carefully, then looked back at Sarah again. His expression was thoughtful rather than excited, suggesting that while he was detecting something, it wasn't the target odor they were trained to find. Sarah realized what was happening. Rex was distinguishing between the target explosive scents and other chemical odors present in the environment, petroleum products, cleaning solvents, and industrial chemicals that might confuse a less discriminating nose. Instead of giving a false positive, he was essentially asking for confirmation about whether this particular scent was something she wanted him to alert on. "Good thinking, but that's not our target," Sarah said softly. "Keep searching." Rex's tail wagged once, acknowledging her guidance, and he moved on to continue his systematic search pattern. The observers watching this interaction exchanged glances. The communication between Sarah and Rex was unlike anything they had seen in traditional detection training. Most dogs were trained to make binary decisions, alert or don't alert, without the kind of nuanced communication that would allow for this type of collaborative problem solving. As they continued working through the scenario, Rex located the first training aid hidden in the engine compartment of a sedan. His alert was immediate and unmistakable. He sat directly in front of the target location and stared intently at the spot, his body language communicating complete confidence in his find. "Good boy," Sarah praised enthusiastically, producing Rex's favorite tennis ball for a brief but energetic game of tug-of-war. The reward was clearly meaningful to Rex, whose tail wagged with obvious pleasure and pride. But as they resumed searching, Sarah noticed that the civilian role-players were increasing their level of activity and distraction as planned by the exercise designers. People were walking past the search area, engaging in loud conversations, and generally creating the kind of chaotic environment that dogs and handlers might encounter in real operational situations. Many dogs became distracted or anxious in this type of environment, but Rex seemed to thrive on the challenge. His focus on the work actually seemed to sharpen as the distractions increased, as if the added complexity made the task more interesting rather than more difficult. They located the second and third training aids efficiently, Rex's alerts becoming increasingly confident and precise. But the fourth device was hidden in a particularly challenging location, inside a backpack that had been placed among several other similar bags in the back of a pickup truck. This type of scenario often caused problems for detection dogs because the target scent was mixed with multiple other odors, and the visual complexity of the search area could be overwhelming. As Rex approached the truck bed, Sarah could see him working harder to process the sensory information. Instead of rushing him or trying to direct his search, Sarah gave Rex the space and time he needed to work through the challenge methodically. She watched as he carefully investigated each bag, his nose working to separate and identify the different scent sources. When Rex finally located the target device, his alert was different from his previous finds. Instead of immediately sitting and staring, he approached the bag containing the device and then looked back at Sarah with an expression that seemed to ask for permission to investigate further. The bag was partially unzipped, and Sarah realized that Rex wanted to confirm his find by getting closer to the scent source. "Show me," Sarah said, giving him permission to continue investigating. Rex carefully nosed the bag open wider, located the exact position of the training aid inside, and then backed away to give his standard alert behavior. His precision was remarkable. He had not only located the device, but had pinpointed its exact location within the complex search area. The watching instructors were visibly impressed. This level of precision and intelligent problem-solving was exceptional for any detection dog, but it was particularly noteworthy coming from a team that had been training for less than 2 weeks. With 15 minutes remaining in the exercise, Sarah and Rex had successfully located 4 of the 6 hidden devices. The final 2 were placed in the most challenging locations, one in a concealed compartment of a military vehicle and another buried in the ground near the perimeter of the search area. As they approached the military vehicle, Sarah noticed that Rex's search pattern was becoming more efficient and focused. The dog seemed to have developed an understanding of the exercise parameters and was now working with the kind of strategic thinking that usually took months to develop. Rex located the 5th device quickly, his alert behavior now so refined and confident that there was no ambiguity about his communication. But the final device proved to be the most challenging yet. The ground burial was designed to test the limits of a dog's scenting ability and the handler's trust in their partner's capabilities. The device was buried 18 inches underground in an area where the soil had been disturbed and replaced, leaving minimal surface indicators. Many dogs struggle with this type of hide because the scent cone was subtle and the visual cues were minimal. As Rex began working the perimeter area where Sarah suspected the final device might be hidden, she could see him processing information that was invisible to human senses. Rex worked methodically across the area, his nose tracking scent patterns that existed only in the air currents and soil composition. After several minutes of careful investigation, he stopped in a seemingly unremarkable spot and began to show intense interest, his tail beginning to wag with the excitement that typically preceded an alert. But instead of immediately alerting, Rex began to dig slightly at the surface, something that was not part of his trained alert behavior. Sarah realized that he was trying to get closer to the scent source to confirm his find, demonstrating the kind of initiative and problem-solving that exceeded the parameters of standard detection training. "Is that it, buddy?" Sarah asked, and Rex immediately sat and stared at the spot, his alert behavior clear and unmistakable. When the exercise concluded, Sarah and Rex had successfully located all 6 training aids in 18 minutes, one of the fastest and most accurate performances in the facility's recent history. But more impressive than their speed and accuracy was the quality of their teamwork and communication throughout the exercise. As they walked off the course, Sarah could hear the conversations among the observers. Words like exceptional, remarkable, and unprecedented floated through the discussions, and she could see that several senior instructors were taking notes and asking questions about her training methods. Staff Sergeant Park approached with a broad smile. "That was outstanding work, Martinez. I've been training detection dogs for 8 years, and I've never seen that level of intelligence and communication between a handler and dog, especially not from a team with so little formal training." Sergeant Williams joined the conversation, his expression thoughtful. "Impressive results," he admitted, "but I want to understand what's different about your approach. Traditional military dog training emphasizes control, discipline, and standardized responses. What you're doing looks more like a collaboration than a command structure." Sarah considered her response carefully. She understood that she was being asked to explain not just her methods, but her philosophy about working with intelligent animals in high-stakes situations. "I think these dogs are capable of much more than we typically ask of them," she said finally. "Rex isn't just following commands. He's actively thinking about the problems we're asking him to solve. When I treat him as an intelligent partner rather than just a tool, he brings his full capabilities to the work. The result is better performance and more reliable results." Williams nodded slowly. "It's an interesting theory, but theory and practice are different things. Tomorrow we start protection training and tactical scenarios. Those situations involve stress, physical confrontation, and split-second decisions where lives may hang in the balance. We'll see how your collaborative approach holds up when the pressure really increases. As Sarah led Rex back to his kennel that evening, she reflected on the challenges that lay ahead. The detection training had been demanding, but she knew that protection training would test not just Rex's abilities, but her own courage and judgment in situations designed to simulate combat conditions. But looking down at Rex, who walked beside her with the confident stride of a dog who knew he had performed well, Sarah felt ready for whatever came next. They had proven that partnership and mutual respect could produce exceptional results in detection work. Now, they would have the opportunity to discover whether the same principles could succeed in an even more demanding world of protection and tactical operations. The protection training facility was a stark contrast to the detection training area. Where the previous week had been focused on precision and patience, this environment was designed to test aggression, courage, and split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. The facility included multiple buildings set up to simulate urban combat environments, complete with obstacles, hiding places, and scenarios designed to push both dogs and handlers to their limits. Sarah stood with Rex at the edge of the main training area, watching as the instructor, Master Sergeant David Rodriguez, demonstrated the basics of protection work with his partner, intimidating Belgian Malinois named Viper. Rodriguez was a combat veteran with multiple deployments, and his reputation for producing elite protection dogs was legendary throughout the military working dog community. Protection work is fundamentally different from everything you've done so far, Rodriguez explained to the assembled handlers. Detection work is about patience and precision. Protection work is about controlled aggression, instant response, and the willingness to engage in physical confrontation when necessary. Your dog needs to be able to go from calm to aggressive and back to calm on your command, sometimes multiple times in a single scenario. He gestured toward a padded training decoy who was standing ready to serve as a target for the demonstration. Watch carefully. This is what we're working toward. Rodriguez gave Viper a quiet command, and the dog's demeanor transformed instantly. Where moments before he had been sitting calmly, he now radiated focused intensity. When Rodriguez gave the attack command, Viper exploded forward with breathtaking speed and power, engaging the decoy with a controlled but fierce bite to the padded arm. What impressed Sarah most was not the aggression, but the precision. Viper maintained his grip exactly where he had been trained to bite, and when Rodriguez called him off, the dog released immediately and returned to a controlled position beside his handler. Control, Rodriguez emphasized as Viper sat panting but alert beside him. Anyone could train a dog to be aggressive. What we need are dogs who can channel that aggression precisely where and when we need it, and who can shut it off instantly when the situation changes. Sarah felt Rex tense slightly beside her as he watched the demonstration. The dog's intelligent eyes were tracking every movement, and she could sense that he was processing what he was seeing with the same analytical approach he brought to detection work. When her turn came for the initial assessment, Sarah approached the training area with the same calm confidence she had shown throughout her previous training. But she was acutely aware that protection work would require her to ask Rex to engage in behaviors that were fundamentally different from anything they had worked on together. We start with basic bite development, Rodriguez explained. The dog needs to learn to engage a threat with controlled aggression while maintaining responsiveness to handler commands. Rex has been evaluated as having appropriate drive for protection work, but we need to see how he channels that drive under your direction. The first exercise involved encouraging Rex to bite a padded sleeve held by a training decoy. For many dogs, this was natural behavior that emerged easily once they understood what was expected. But Sarah could sense Rex's confusion about this sudden change in expectations. Throughout their detection training, Rex had been rewarded for calm, controlled behavior, and precise communication. Now he was being asked to engage in aggressive behavior that seemed to contradict everything they had established together. Sarah knelt beside Rex and spoke quietly to him. "This is different work, buddy, but it's still partnership. I need you to trust me that this is what we need to do." Rex looked up at her with an expression that seemed to communicate uncertainty. His body language showed that he understood aggression was being requested, but his natural intelligence was questioning whether this was really what Sarah wanted from him. Rodriguez watched this interaction with interest. Most dogs either show immediate enthusiasm for bite work or they show fear and reluctance, he observed. Rex seems to be thinking about it, which is unusual. Sarah stood and gave Rex the attack command she had been taught. Rex looked at the decoy, then back at Sarah, his expression clearly asking for confirmation that this was really what she wanted. Yes, Rex. Bite, Sarah repeated with more conviction. Rex approached the decoy cautiously, engaged the padded sleeve with a tentative bite, then immediately looked back at Sarah to confirm that he was doing what she wanted. His bite was controlled and precise, but it lacked the aggressive intensity that Rodriguez was looking for. He's thinking too much, Rodriguez said bluntly. Protection work requires instant response and aggressive commitment. A hesitant dog can't protect you when you're in real danger. Over the following days, Sarah struggled to help Rex understand what was expected in protection work while maintaining the partnership and communication that had made them so successful in detection training. Rex was clearly capable of aggressive behavior when necessary, but his intelligence and strong bond with Sarah made him reluctant to act aggressively without clear understanding of the situation. The breakthrough came during a scenario-based exercise designed to simulate a realistic threat situation. Instead of the artificial setup of basic bite development, Sarah and Rex were placed in a mock building where they had to search for and apprehend a hidden suspect. As they moved through the building, Rex's demeanor was focused and alert, but not artificially aggressive. When they encountered the decoy hiding in a room, Rex immediately positioned himself between Sarah and the potential threat, his body language communicating readiness without unnecessary aggression. When the decoy made a sudden aggressive movement towards Sarah, Rex's response was instant and decisive. He engaged the threat with fierce determination, his bite powerful and committed. But when Sarah called him off, he released immediately and returned to her side, his attention focused on watching for any continuing threat. Now that's what I'm talking about, Rodriguez said with obvious approval. He understands the difference between training exercises and real protection scenarios. That level of situational intelligence is exactly what we need in operational dogs. Sarah realized that Rex hadn't been hesitant about protection work. He had been trying to understand the context and purpose of the aggression being requested. Once he understood that his job was to protect Sarah from real threats, his natural intelligence and loyalty produced exactly the kind of controlled but fierce response that made the best protection dogs. Word of Sarah and Rex's unique performance began to spread beyond the immediate training facility. Senior officers began to visit their training sessions, and Sarah found herself fielding questions about her methods from instructors and handlers throughout the base. Major Patricia Walsh, the commanding officer of the Military Working Dog Program, arrived unannounced during one of Sarah's advanced training sessions. Walsh was known for her no-nonsense approach to evaluation and her extremely high standards for military working dog teams. Sarah was working with Rex on a complex scenario that combined detection and protection elements when she noticed the major observing from the edge of the training area. The exercise required Rex to search a vehicle for explosive devices while remaining alert for potential threats from civilians in the area. As Rex worked methodically through the detection search, one of the role-playing civilians began to approach Sarah in an apparently threatening manner. Without interrupting his search work, Rex positioned himself to monitor the potential threat while continuing his detection work. When the civilian made a sudden aggressive movement towards Sarah, Rex immediately shifted from detection work to protection mode, engaging the threat while somehow managing to maintain his alert on the explosive device he had just located. Outstanding, Major Walsh said when the exercise concluded. That's exactly the kind of multitasking capability we need in deployed dogs. How long has this team been training? 3 weeks, ma'am, Rodriguez replied, his tone reflecting his own amazement at the rapid progress. Walsh studied Sarah and Rex thoughtfully. 3 weeks? That's remarkable. Most teams need 3 months to reach that level of integration between different skill sets. She approached Sarah directly. Martinez, I understand that your training methods are somewhat unconventional. Can you explain your approach? Sarah felt the weight of attention from all the observers. This was clearly an important moment, not just for her own career, but potentially for the future of the military working dog program. Ma'am, I believe these dogs are capable of much more than we typically ask from them, Sarah began. When we treat them as intelligent partners rather than just tools, they bring their full capabilities to the work. Rex doesn't just follow commands. He understands the purpose of what we're doing and uses his intelligence to help accomplish our mission. Walsh nodded thoughtfully. Show me what you mean. Sarah led Rex to a complex scenario that Rodriguez had set up for advanced teams. The situation involved multiple buildings, hidden threats, and a combination of detection and protection challenges that typically took experienced teams considerable time to complete successfully. Rex, we need to clear these buildings and make sure they're safe, Sarah explained to the dog, speaking in a conversational tone rather than using formal commands. You know what we're looking for. What happened next amazed everyone watching. Rex approached the scenario with obvious understanding of the overall mission rather than simply waiting for specific commands. He systematically cleared each building, alternating between detection work and security alertness as the situation required. When he located a hidden explosive device, he alerted clearly, but quietly, communicating the find to Sarah without making noise that might alert nearby threats. When he encountered a hidden suspect, he positioned himself strategically and waited for Sarah's direction rather than engaging automatically. The entire performance demonstrated a level of tactical thinking and situational awareness that exceeded anything the observers had seen from military working dogs. Extraordinary, Major Walsh said when the exercise was complete. This dog isn't just following training protocols. He's actually thinking about the tactical situation and making intelligent decisions to support the mission. She turned to address the gathered instructors and observers. This is exactly the kind of capability advancement we need to be developing. Martinez, I want you to document your training methods and prepare to present them to the senior leadership of the military working dog program. As the crowd dispersed, Rodriguez approached Sarah with a thoughtful expression. You've accomplished something remarkable here, he said, but I want you to understand what you're getting into. If the senior leadership decides to adopt your methods program-wide, you'll be responsible for training instructors and handlers throughout the entire military working dog community. That's a huge responsibility for someone who's been in the program for 3 weeks. Sarah looked down at Rex, who was sitting calmly beside her, his intelligent eyes reflecting the satisfaction of a job well done. She thought about the journey that had brought them to this point and about the potential impact their success could have on military working dog operations around the world. I understand the responsibility, sir, she said finally, but I also understand the potential. If these methods can help other handlers develop the same kind of partnership with their dogs that Rex and I have, then military working dog teams could become more effective than anyone has imagined. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Tomorrow you'll face the final evaluation scenario. It's designed to test everything you've learned under the most demanding conditions possible. If you and Rex can succeed at that level, you'll have proven that your methods can work under any circumstances. That evening, as Sarah sat in her quarters preparing for the final challenge, she reflected on how much had changed in just 3 weeks. She had arrived as an unproven recruit facing skepticism and doubt. Now she was being asked to potentially revolutionize the entire approach to military working dog training. But more importantly, she and Rex had developed a partnership that exceeded anything she had imagined possible. They had proven that intelligence, respect, and collaboration could produce extraordinary results even in the demanding world of military operations. The final test would determine whether they could maintain that partnership under the ultimate pressure. The final evaluation scenario was designed to test every skill that military working dog teams might need in actual deployment conditions. The exercise would take place in a mock forward operating base, complete with multiple buildings, civilian populations, potential threats, and realistic battlefield conditions, including simulated gunfire and explosions. Sarah stood at the briefing podium as Major Walsh outlined the mission parameters to an audience that included not only her training cohort, but also senior officers from throughout the military working dog community who had come to observe this unprecedented evaluation. The scenario simulates a high-value target capture mission in an urban environment, Major Walsh explained. Handler Martinez and Rex will be required to clear multiple buildings for explosive devices, locate and apprehend armed suspects, protect civilian populations, and extract intelligence materials, all while operating under hostile fire conditions. She paused to let the complexity of the mission sink in. This scenario typically requires a team of multiple handlers and dogs working in coordination. Martinez and Rex will be attempting it as a single team, which has never been done successfully in the history of this program. Sarah felt the weight of expectation from everyone in the room, but as she looked down at Rex, she saw only calm confidence in his intelligent eyes. Over the past 3 weeks, they had developed a level of communication and trust that made even the most complex scenarios feel manageable. The evaluation will be scored on multiple criteria, Major Walsh continued. Technical proficiency in detection and protection work, tactical effectiveness, time efficiency, safety protocols, and overall mission completion. A passing score requires 90% or higher in all categories. As Sarah and Rex prepared to enter the training area, Rodriguez approached for final guidance. Remember, he said quietly, this isn't just about proving your methods work under pressure. Every instructor and handler in this room will be watching to see if what you've accomplished is something that can be replicated by others, or if it's just a unique partnership between you and Rex. Sarah nodded, understanding that the implications of their performance extended far beyond her own career. If they succeeded, it could change the way military working dogs were trained throughout the armed forces. If they failed, it would reinforce traditional approaches and limit opportunities for innovation. Rex, ready to work? Sarah asked, using their familiar preparation phrase. Rex's response was immediate and focused. His posture straightened, his ears came to attention, and his entire demeanor communicated readiness and enthusiasm for whatever challenges lay ahead. The scenario began in a mock marketplace where civilian role players created a chaotic environment designed to test the team's ability to maintain focus under distraction. Hidden somewhere in the area was their first objective, intelligence materials that needed to be located and secured. Instead of immediately beginning a systematic search, Sarah took a moment to assess the overall situation. She noticed that Rex was already processing the environment, his nose working to separate relevant scents from the background odors of the marketplace. What do you think, buddy? Sarah asked quietly. Where should we start? Rex looked around the area thoughtfully, then began moving toward a section of the marketplace where his body language suggested he was detecting something of interest. Sarah followed his lead, trusting his instincts while maintaining awareness of the civilian populations around them. Rex led them to a vendor stall where he showed subtle signs of detection interest. Using hand signals rather than verbal commands to avoid alerting potential threats, Sarah directed Rex to investigate the area more thoroughly. Rex's search was methodical and precise, but he worked with the kind of tactical awareness that kept him constantly alert for threats while focusing on the detection task. When he located the hidden intelligence materials, his alert was quiet and controlled, communicating the find to Sarah without drawing attention from the role-playing civilians. Excellent work, Sarah praised softly, producing Rex's tennis ball for a quick reward before securing the materials and moving toward the next phase of the scenario. The second objective required them to clear a multi-story building for explosive devices while potential armed suspects remained hidden inside. This type of scenario was particularly dangerous because it required the dog to work in close quarters while remaining alert for both explosive threats and human attackers. As they approached the building, Sarah could hear the sounds of simulated gunfire in the distance, designed to create stress and urgency in the scenario. Rex's ears tracked the sounds, but his focus remained on Sarah and their mission rather than being distracted by the environmental stressors. Building clearance, Sarah said quietly. Detection priority, but stay alert for threats. Rex approached the building with obvious understanding of the tactical situation. He worked systematically through the ground floor, his detection work thorough and precise while his positioning showed that he was maintaining security awareness. On the second floor, Rex suddenly stopped and adopted a defensive posture, his attention focused on a doorway ahead. Sarah realized that he had detected a human presence that might represent a threat. Using tactical hand signals, she directed Rex to maintain his position while she assessed the situation. When a role-playing suspect emerged from a room with simulated aggressive intent, Rex's response was immediate and perfectly calibrated. He engaged the threat with controlled aggression, neutralizing the suspect without excessive force, and releasing on Sarah's command when the situation was secure. Outstanding tactical awareness, came a comment from one of the observing instructors over the radio communication system. But the most challenging part of the scenario was yet to come. The final objective required Rex to locate and alert on an explosive device that was hidden in a complex environment designed to test the limits of canine scenting ability, while Sarah had to coordinate with simulated friendly forces under hostile fire conditions. As they approached the final building, the scenario designers activated loudspeakers that filled the area with the sounds of intense combat. Automatic weapons fire, explosions, and radio communications that created an overwhelming auditory environment. Many dogs became anxious or distracted under these conditions, but Rex seemed to understand that the sound were part of the training environment rather than real threats. His focus actually seemed to sharpen as the stress level increased, as if the challenging conditions made the work more engaging rather than more difficult. The explosive device was hidden in the most challenging location yet attempted, a basement area with complex air currents, multiple scent sources, and minimal lighting. Rex had to work primarily by scent and instinct, relying on his training and his partnership with Sarah to navigate the challenging environment. Sarah watched as Rex systematically worked through the area, his nose tracking scent patterns that were invisible to human perception. The complexity of the search was evident in his body language. He was working harder than she had ever seen him work, processing multiple layers of sensory information to separate the target's scent from the background odors. After what seemed like an eternity, but was actually only 4 minutes, Rex stopped in a seemingly unremarkable corner and began to show the subtle signs that preceded his alert behavior. Sarah moved closer to observe, trusting Rex's instincts even though she couldn't see any obvious indicators of the device's location. Rex's alert, when it came, was definitive and confident. He sat directly in front of a section of wall where the explosive device was hidden behind a false panel, his stare unwavering and his body language communicating absolute certainty in his find. Target located, Sarah reported over the radio, and the exercise controllers confirmed that Rex had correctly identified the final objective. When the scenario concluded, the training area fell silent except for the sound of applause from the observers. Sarah and Rex had completed the entire mission in 32 minutes, faster than any multi-dog team had ever accomplished the same scenario, with perfect scores in all evaluation categories. Major Walsh approached with an expression that mixed amazement with professional satisfaction. "That was the most impressive demonstration of military working dog capabilities I have seen in 15 years of service," she said. "You and Rex didn't just complete the mission. You redefined what's possible for military working dog teams." She turned to address the assembled observers. "What we've witnessed today represents a fundamental advancement in military working dog training and deployment. Handler Martinez and Rex have demonstrated that when we treat these animals as intelligent partners rather than just tools, they can exceed every expectation we have for their capabilities." Rodriguez joined the group with obvious pride and excitement. "I've been training military working dogs for 12 years, he said, "and I've never seen anything like what this team accomplished today. The level of communication, tactical thinking, and adaptability they demonstrated is going to change how we approach this entire field." But it was the comment from Staff Sergeant Park that meant the most to Sarah. "You proved something important today," she said quietly. "You showed that kindness and respect aren't weaknesses in military training. They're actually the foundation for developing the strongest possible partnerships between handlers and dogs." As the evaluation session concluded and the observers began to disperse, Sarah knelt beside Rex and ran her fingers through his coat. The dog's tail wagged with obvious satisfaction and pride, and his eyes reflected the contentment of an intelligent animal who knew he had performed at the peak of his capabilities. "We did it, buddy," Sarah said softly. "We proved that partnership and respect can accomplish anything." 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a classroom of military working dog instructors from bases around the world, teaching the methods that she and Rex had pioneered during their remarkable 3 weeks of initial training. The program they had developed was being implemented throughout the military working dog community, and the results were exceeding every expectation. Rex, now recognized as one of the most accomplished military working dogs in service, sat calmly beside the podium, occasionally demonstrating techniques for the assembled instructors. His intelligence and capabilities had not only revolutionized training methods, but had also elevated the entire understanding of what military working dogs could accomplish. The young woman who had arrived at Fort Braxton facing skepticism and doubt had become the leading authority on advanced military working dog training. But more importantly, she had proven that sometimes the most powerful achievements come not from demanding obedience, but from building partnerships based on mutual respect, trust, and the recognition that intelligence and compassion can coexist with strength and effectiveness. As Sarah concluded her presentation to the gathered instructors, she looked down at Rex and saw in his eyes the same calm confidence that had characterized their relationship from the very beginning. They had changed not just their own lives, but the lives of countless handlers and dogs who would benefit from the partnership approach they had pioneered. The skeptics who had once doubted whether a young woman with unconventional methods could succeed in the demanding world of military working dog training now sought her guidance and expertise. Sarah Martinez and Rex had not just proved the doubters wrong. They had redefined what was possible when humans and animals work together as true partners in pursuit of a common mission. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.